All right. Thank you, Daniela, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you joining us for this presentation. We're going to be covering just, a little bit of, yard touch-ups, yard makeovers, yard redesign or designing in the first place. So whether you're starting from scratch or if you have something already installed that you want to make even nicer, hopefully this will give you a few tips and tricks and some ideas, inspiring ideas to help you along the way. As Daniela mentioned, I am an Arizona native, and right now I live in Queen Creek, although I have lived in Gilbert and I lived in Phoenix for a while. But I graduated from Arizona State University with a degree in education, and my major was biology. So I love plants, I love bugs. Daniela hasn't worked with me before, but we know each other, and I think she already has an idea that I'm kind of like a plantaholic, and I love talking about them and just passing that information along to everyone else. The materials that Daniela emailed to you include a resources list, and this is something that you can refer to as we go through the presentation or afterwards. There's lots of great book references, some website links that you can use for more information, and kind of pinpointing maybe where your interests lie and things like that. And then we also have kind of an outline of the class that we just call Basic Yard Makeovers. At the end of this document, there is a hypothetical landscape design question. So when you have time, take a look at that, and it gives the question and then the possible solutions. There's the top 10 tips when you're creating a landscape or redoing a landscape. We'll be covering these in the class tonight, as well as a design checklist. And this is just something as a guide to help you as you create or gather ideas for what you want to do with your yard. And lastly, there's a document that has 4 themes, 4 landscape themes. One is Sonoran Desert, one is tropical and New Mexican, one is Southwestern, and the last is Mediterranean. And each page has a separate title. The one that's on the screen now is called Sonoran Desert. And it gives you the plants that you can use to create that theme. So that might be kind of helpful as you go along. There are also brochures that will be very helpful for you to have. And if you don't have them already, please, most of these are online and they're on your reference list. But you can also pick these up at your local water conservation office, or most of the libraries have these in stock. They're free. Some of the nurseries have them as well. And I'll be referring to these a little bit as we go through the class tonight. So there are some reasons to convert to Xeriscape. And Xeriscape's a word that some of you may not have heard before. The reasons you might want to consider this would be to save time, to save water, save money, that's a big one. Save the air, save the environment. Perhaps set an example for your neighbors or your neighborhood. And one benefit of converting to Xeriscape is that you won't have any more mowing, or perhaps a lot less mowing if you're just converting a portion of your yard. So here I have a question to pose to you. So did you know that on average, and this is from the last 30 years average, we get about 8 inches of rain a year. Now, in the last 10 years, we haven't gotten near that much every year, but this is an average. But a lawn needs over 60 inches of water a year. So that's a pretty big difference, and it's a big deficit when you talk about lawn being watered by nature or you having to apply water to it. And unfortunately, lawns are often overwatered, sometimes grossly overwatered, but usually 2 or 3 times more than they really need. And a Xeriscape can cut your water use way back, a half to 2/3 less water than grass. Now, I know not everyone wants to give up their grass, but if you're tired of mowing, you might want to consider it. Or if you're planning a new installation, you might want to consider maybe a little less grass. For a 3,000 square foot area of lawn, and this is just a nice round number to use to give you some information, it needs 105,000 gallons of water per year. That's huge. That same area, that same 3,000 square feet, only needs 44,000 gallons. So that's less than half of the water that grass needs. And we do have to remember that we live in a desert. We're surrounded by desert. Sometimes in the city, it's not really apparent that we live in a desert, but we're surrounded by desert. Our climate, of course, is pretty harsh, especially in summertime with those high temperatures. Here's a view from South Mountain looking down on the downtown Phoenix. If you think about it, we have a lot of days during the year that are over 100 degrees. We're just coming out of summer now, and those hot summer days, frankly, I hate them. I hate them anymore. I want to go inside and hibernate for summer sometimes. But 110, yeah, that is the average number of days in the last, since like 1981, the average number of days with temperatures over 100 degrees. Now, if you think about last year, not this year, because this year I think was a little bit better. We had a lot more rain and the temperatures weren't quite as extreme. But in 2020, we had 144 days of over 100 degrees. And I think that was a new record. I was going to try and check that figure for you, and I just ran out of time to get it for 2021, but I know it's a lot less than 144. But that's really hot. Now, of course, for people, we can go inside where there's air conditioning, or we can move into the shade, but plants are stuck out there. They're in the environment. They have to deal with what is there. And 144 days is a lot of heat for them to have to deal with. This is an image from the U.S. Drought Monitor. They update this once a week. This is from September 21st, so it's about a week old. And if you'll notice, the western half of the U.S. is pretty darn dry. As parts of California, even Washington, Oregon, you can see all that dark sort of maroon color. Those are the driest, most drought-stricken areas. And unfortunately, for California, that's kind of where the fires are burning right now. And it wasn't so long ago that Arizona had that same burgundy color. We were in a pretty significant drought. Things have improved a little, but if you'll notice the L, that means long-term, so long-term drought. Right now, they say that we're in moderate drought, and at least for the time being. We don't know what the future is going to hold for rains. We need a couple, probably 3 or 4 more summers like we've had in this past to help things, and some great winters. We need a great winter rain. But you can look this up. If you just go to the U.S. Drought Monitor, you can do a Google search, and you can check this out every now and then if you're curious. So what does Xeriscape mean? You heard me use that term a little earlier, Xeriscape. It's a man-made word. It comes from, of course, the Greek word xeros, which means dry, and then they added scape to the end, so it's a dry scape, a dry landscape. And to help you remember when you pronounce it, it's Xeriscape. Everybody gets confused with that X. So xeros, it's a dry world. So think of xeric environments, those are deserts. Xerophytes, those are desert plants. Xerox, I think that's the one that's easiest for folks to remember. Xerox is a dry copy. And even though it starts with an X, it's pronounced Z, Xerox. So they have xeriscapes, they're dry landscapes. This is not a xeriscape. This is a xeroscape. And this is not what we're trying to encourage you to achieve. This landscape has nothing growing in it. Even the trees in the background, those are on the next street over. So Xeriscape. Don't pronounce it Xeriscape, it's Xeriscape, because this is a Xeriscape. This is a Xeriscape. It's colorful, it has interesting plants, it has plants that use a lot less water, but are still very attractive. And there's some more examples. Here's another one. Under the shade of this great mesquite tree, they've got some annuals, some winter annual flowers, and even a lot of container plants. And just a little bit of shade, you can it makes it a lot easier to grow more things. Here's another Xeriscape. Not a big variety of plants, but they're green and they're covering the soil, so it helps cool the soil, keep the soil cool. Another one with a variety of textures. So there's low growing things, there's spiky things, and even the greens. There's gray greens and sort of muted color greens and then deep greens. This is also a Xeriscape. And notice they have a pool and they have some grass, but it's still a low water use landscape. This Xeriscape has a variety of layers. So of course the lawn, that would be like the ground layer, the ground covers, the lantana, the purple lantana, that's another layer, the shrubs, another layer, and then the trees, another layer. So lots of layers here. This home is in central Phoenix in the downtown, the historic district. And instead of fences down there, they have these tall oleanders. And this homeowner left the oleanders, but remodeled the yard a bit, took out some of the grass and put in some low water use plants and added some color in the way of paint and a bubbling fountain. There are Xeriscape principles, and of course that includes planning and design, using appropriate turf areas, efficient irrigation, grading your soil, using mulches, and then plants. Plants are down on the list here. Last is appropriate maintenance. So all of these are Xeriscape principles. And I like to tell people to think of their landscape as an extension of your living space, because except in the dead heat of summer, you can use your outdoor spaces as an extension of your living space. And it should be appropriate to the architecture of your home, your lifestyle, where you live, your region where you live, along with your climate and of course your budget. And don't forget color. Color is so important. It can be very useful when you try and remodel a landscape. Of course, this is the color wheel. And we have warm, hot colors on one side of the color wheel. So the reds, oranges, yellows. And on the other side, we've got what they consider cool colors, cool and relaxing colors, blues, violets, greens. And you can use these to your advantage when you're creating or remodeling a landscape. These are what they call the hot, warm colors. And they say that red is aggressive and that it could raise your metabolism or even your blood pressure. I'm not sure about that, but it is a very intense color. Orange is enthusiastic, and yellow is something that attracts attention. And if you'll notice that many traffic signs are yellow because it draws your eye. And here's a landscape that has a lot of those hot, warm colors, not only in the plants themselves, but also in the architecture of the home, the tile and the awning. But it's very bold. Those cool colors, the blues, the purples and greens. Blue is calm. Purple is mysterious, and greens are restful and peaceful. And this is a pretty peaceful landscape. Has some muted colors here with a splash of yellow along the pathway to kind of liven things up a bit. Chandler did a class, I can't remember if it was last spring or last year, but it was called Color Your World, and it was on using color in the landscape. And also it had about 1/3 of the class was actually going through plants to use in landscape. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go to the Secret Chandler webpage and look that. It's still on the video. It's still up on the internet site, and you can watch it or watch the portions of it that apply to you, because we won't be covering exact plants tonight. We just don't have time. There are some steps for converting a landscape, or even starting a landscape for that matter. Having a plan, so important, and we'll talk a little bit about that. If you have grass, you'll need to remove it. You'll also want to think about grading your yard and possibly reworking the irrigation. Of course, if it's a new install, then that would be you're starting from scratch. But if you have a landscape that you're redoing, you can remodel or rework the system that's already there, perhaps. Then planting and maintenance, and of course, enjoying your landscape. And we're going to go through these a little one by one, and spend a little time with some ideas and, of course, some great visuals to help you create the landscape of your dreams. As I mentioned, having a plan, very important. By taking this class, you're going to get some ideas, and you can put those to good use. There's a whole process in the design, in creating a design. And that would include doing a site analysis or property assessment, creating a needs and wants list, and then creating a bubble diagram, just simple sketches of where you might want to put things, designing outdoor rooms, and then kind of further down the list, number 5 is selecting the plants, and finally installing irrigation and then installing the plants. So making a wish list, just sit down when you have some time and think about all the things that you would like to have, and don't limit yourself. Just put them all down, because you can always put something off till later as your budget or your time allows. But in the beginning, just go for it. Make a list of your fantasy list of everything you want in your landscape, which might include some of these, play areas, entertainment areas, whether you like to attract wildlife, or maybe you just need a quiet place to relax. We talked a little bit about color, but maybe you want to add more. Maybe you want to grow your own vegetables or fruits. Or maybe you want to put that spa or pool in that you've always wanted. A few years ago, the American Society of Landscape Architects, or ASLA, they did a survey, and they looked at outdoor design elements in the column on the left. And when it came to outdoor living spaces, these were the things that people identified that they wanted or that they liked. So this might help you as you build your list. Grills and fireplaces or fire pits, seating, lighting, water elements, counter spaces, storage, stereo systems, even outdoor kitchens, it looks like. So think about those. The top 10 tips for creating a landscape include weeding your yard, using boulders, selecting granite. There's lots of different colors and lots of different textures. They range from 1/4 minus, which is very, very fine, to 3/4 inch granite. Grouping your plants, thinking about views, selecting a theme, of course, conservation, hardscape elements, flowers, and native plants. And we'll touch on these a little bit as we go through the whole presentation tonight. Here's a little bit more about the themes. And now you're not limited just the 4 that are on the handout. You can use lots of other themes in your landscape. For instance, rustic or formal or even specialized landscapes. List could go on and on. There are some rules to follow as you create your landscape plan. Try and keep it simple. Decide on a main theme or a goal. Use 1 or 2 focal points. And try and have a short plant material list, which is the one I always struggle with because I love plants and I want them all. But trust me, just stick to maybe the top 20 plants that would be the best to incorporate in your landscape. And you can take pictures of landscape that you like, or in magazines or brochures, there might be landscapes that are attractive to you or something you want to try and recreate. You can even look on Pinterest and to create your own page or look for other ideas. That's always helpful. There's a few techniques to think about as you develop your plan. Try working with Mother Nature instead of against her. We live in a desert environment and some plants just hate it here. So just resist the urge to grow things like camellias, gardenias. I mean, it can be done, but it is hard. You have to have the right place. And I've tried several times to grow hibiscus, and I'm just a failure. So there are some desert adapted hibiscus plants, and that's something that you might want to try instead. Try and recreate a natural look. Informal landscapes are usually easier and less costly to maintain, and they're a little more relaxing to be in. Work with odd numbers of plants, so 3 and 5, 7, instead of just 1 or 2. You can frame views. You can conceal things that maybe aren't very attractive to look at, or you can enhance a view. In other words, if you've got a great view of the Santan Mountains or something, you might not want to block that with a tree. You might want to leave that open so you can see the mountains. And here's a landscape that has used a lot of the elements that we were talking about. They've got a theme here, which I would probably call maybe Southwestern. They've got a variety of layers. They've used boulders. It's the landscape itself is interesting to look at, and they have a variety of textures. And this is actually a photo in the series called Xeriscape Landscaping with Style. That's one of the brochures that I used as a reference at the beginning. It has a lot of photos like this that you can use to choose from. Maybe there's part of this that you really like and you want to incorporate that into your landscape. Some more techniques would be tucking and massing and layering your plants. And that's why the use of boulders is so handy, because you can tuck little plants in around them or amongst them. But be sure to leave open space so that your eyes can rest. If a landscape is just filled every inch with a plant or something, then it's not as interesting to look at, and your eyes tend to try and sort through it, trying to pick out different things. So if you leave open space, it gives your eyes a chance to sort of like take a breather. Some plants are really powerful, really large. We have some extremely large cactus, for example, and maybe 1 is all that you need. If you're lucky enough to have raised planters, things that spill over the edges look really pretty. And here's a young landscape that has, it's an example of a couple of things. First of all, of course, it has some grass, and it has a granite mulch or ground cover. along with some desert adapted plants. This is a young tree right in front. But notice that there is open space. It's not completely filled with plants. And also notice that the curb around the lawn is curved. The curb is curved. And that actually slows your eye down when you look through a landscape, and it creates the illusion of more space. So as your eye travels around this curve, it slows down, your eye actually relaxes. This is, something you don't even think about, of course, and then it creates the illusion of a larger area than it really is. There's some options for walkways even. You don't have to have just straight lines. You could have something like this with broken pieces of flagstone. Or here's another one where they've taken concrete and just staggered it instead of making just a solid, pour. And it's much more interesting. And here's a couple more. I love the broken pieces of pottery that they've taken and mortared in between these flagstone pieces. And then of course the pathway itself goes around the back of the home here, the structure. This one is incredible, and I'm sure it was very tedious to create, but it's beautiful. The outcome is beautiful with the stones placed the way they are. And here's just a regular concrete, but it's curved. And not only is it curved, going by the house, but then it curves around the back of the house, which actually creates the question in your mind, what's back there? I want to go back there and see, rather than just a straight walkway with a 90-degree angle going to the right. Much more interesting. You don't even have to use concrete. Here's one using, some curbing and then granite. You have some flagstone pieces put in there as well. And this photo is an illustration of different materials or surfaces that you might want to use. Not only does it have the concrete, which is kind of that aggregate exposed concrete, but to the left, looks like some terracotta tile. Under the lawn furniture, it looks like flagstone. And so you don't have to stick with just one type of surface. You can use different ones. And here's a pathway with just granite itself. This is in an open area. It looks like a part of an HOA or something. And they've used a coarser granite for the landscape itself. And then along the pathway, they use the quarter minus, which is a lot finer. And most of the time in public areas, when they use a walkway like this, they take a stabilizer and apply it to the actual path so that it is much more stable for people to walk on if it gets a lot of traffic. If you do this at home, you might not need it. You can just use regular granite. And here are some steps to create a site analysis or a property assessment. It's just the way your house and your property sit on your lot. And you want to think about your lifestyle, your surroundings, and the sun and the weather. And this is a plot plan. You can make one of your home if you don't have one already. Using graph paper helps. It doesn't have to be exactly to scale. This home is facing south. So the garage, the driveway, you can see the driveway there on the south side. And we're going to look just real quickly at the way sun angles, wind direction, people movement, slope or water movement, views, and plant placement affect your home on its lot. The sun changes angles. We all know that, from summer to winter, sun angles change. Right now, we're kind of at that equinox point where the sun is nearly overhead and the days and nights are nearly the same length. But in the winter, the sun moves to the south and we get long shadows on the north side of the home. And this is important because many plants can't tolerate dense shade. So to take a look at your home's shadows for the next month or so and kind of see where those would be. Usually it's on the north side, that's where the deepest shade is. And then if you're going to be adding plants, just take that into consideration. In the summertime, of course, we get a lot more sun and very little shade on the north side. And there are some plants that can take that high sun exposure and others that really can't. So just keep that in mind, as I mentioned, when you're trying to pick out your plants. This slide has just an example of a landscape that has the elements that we kind of covered earlier. So it has a focal point, has that the fireplace, they're in the background. There are a lot of varieties in textures. The soft sort of billowy plant, rose-colored plant in the front, that's called pink muley grass, and it blooms in the fall. Those are the blooms, the pinkish color. It's a bunching grass, so it stays in one place, it doesn't travel. And it just adds, it softens all the rock and hardscape that we generally have around our homes. We usually have concrete and rocks and maybe boulders, so that really helps to soften it. And then the yellow, I'm sure that's lantana, that livens things up with its pretty yellow color. They've even got, and I don't know if they did this on purpose, but the rocks in the foreground kind of pick up the color in the fence. And the flagstone right in front of that fireplace pick up the color in the muley grass. There are some special spaces that you might want to think about, especially if you have children or grandchildren or pets, or maybe you just want a place to entertain, or, ooh, is that a dirty word, exercise, recreation, or relaxation. These are all areas that you might want to incorporate into your landscape, depending on your needs. So for kids, this particular homeowner had a big mesquite tree in their backyard, and they hung a tire swing in it, and the kids just had a great time playing on that. If you don't have a shade that's created by a tree, there are some alternatives. But when it comes to children's areas, of course, we need easy access, high visibility, something that's secure and free from hazards, and of course, the available space. So on the left is the tree house where that tire swing is. But if you don't have a tree that's large enough for a swing or a tree house, you can use these shade sails to give great shade to an area. And don't forget the native plants or the desert adapted plants. These are going to be the easiest to take care of, the less likely to be bothered by pests. There's lots of great wildflowers to choose from. And these are just some of our native neighbors, I guess you might call them. Of course, a quail, the cactus ferns in the middle. Everybody knows hummingbirds. On the right with a yellow face is called a verdin, a little tiny bird with a great big voice. Of course, geckos, they're great for insect control. And on the far left is a caterpillar on a milkweed. And you know what caterpillars are, don't you? They're baby butterflies. There are even landscapes that can give your senses a new perspective. There are, of course, plants that are aromatic. There are plants that make noise. They have seed pods that will snap when they open. Of course, they're pretty to look at, and especially in the case of vegetable gardens, they're great to taste, but there are a lot of edible landscape plants. So these will stimulate your senses. Or if you have pets, you might think about where pets wander. And a lot of times they walk along or run along the fence lines. So having plants there might not be the greatest idea. In this case, the homeowner in the upper right, they created raised beds to kind of keep them away from the dogs. And they give the dogs their own fire plug that looks like a little water splash pool back there. Entertainment can be, really simple. This one looks like a fire pit and a nice little yard, a young landscape, it looks like. And here's another idea for a fireplace with some, comfy outdoor furniture. And even another one. Fireplaces make great areas where people can gather and talk, and laugh. Just some ideas for you when it comes to fireplaces. Here's another fire pit. And notice how the wall that they painted blue is really attractive. Much more so than it would be if it was just plain, plain stucco, plain concrete. Outdoor dining. This one's really nice. They have a pretty elaborate sort of outdoor kitchen there. You can even watch movies outdoors. They have these blow up movie screens that you can use. When the weather gets nicer, what a great idea. A lot of people have this little narrow area on the side of their house that it's just, what do you do with it? It's not big enough to put a tree in, and it might be close to your neighbor. This design kind of helped give it some shade without planting a tree there. And these are sort of a retractable shade. And then it looks like they have a vine growing on the wall. But that gives you a little more, makes the space more usable. And here's another outdoor room. They've got some colorful pots. Recreation. This person obviously likes golf. So they've got their own putting green. For exercise, you can have your own basketball court or lap pool. And relaxation. I think most of us would really like to have a place to just come home and just unwind. And there's nothing like the sound of water to help you do this. A bubbling fountain. These are pretty easy to maintain. And you don't have to have an exposed body of water. You can even install a completely self-sufficient pond. It actually is a whole bioculture. It has a recirculating water system that cleans the water as it filters through. Or you can just have a couple of really nice chairs under the shade of a tree. This homeowner has a nice little bench out here with a kiva. And what about a hammock? Sounds like a great idea. To make this even more attractive, you could have a vine growing over the top of this structure. And that would give you more shade too. There are a number of ideas when it comes to focal points. This is a simple little recycling fountain that fills up the little bucket and tips over. Or here's one of those kivas again. Or you can use various types of art. And don't forget the color. This fence is actually masking the pool equipment. And by painting it blue like this, and then of course having the bougainvillea grow over it, it's really attractive. These colors are a little more bold. And you can incorporate color into the furniture. This homeowner was able to paint their windowsill. I'm not sure all of us could do that or not. Okay, so we've got some ideas about what to do outside, including doing focal points. So let's talk about actually getting rid of grass. Now, those of you that don't have grass, you can just kind of skip this part, but it's good to know. Maybe you've got a friend or perhaps a family member that is thinking about getting rid of their grass. It can be pretty tough. One thing that makes Bermuda grass so great for our desert environment is that it grows when it's 115 or even hotter. It can survive the winter and then come back to life, in the spring. But that's also why it's so hard to get rid of. And the key to making a conversion, because you don't want that Bermuda to grow back, you've got to thoroughly kill it along with all the weeds in the area where you're thinking about making your conversion. And there are a number of different methods for grass removal. There are mechanical, we'll look at that in a moment. Solarization, that does work, although it works best in the heat of the summer. Of course, chemical. But one thing that does not work is neglect. So on the bottom left, you can turn the water off a Bermuda area that's been a Bermuda lawn for decades, turn the water off and leave it off for 2 years. And as soon as you get water to that area again, the grass usually starts growing. So just turning the water off is not going to kill it. You'll have to use something a little more drastic. If you want to try the solarization, I don't think you'd be successful at this point in the year, because we're past the intense summer heat, and that's what we need in order to kill both the above and below ground parts of the Bermuda. But how you do it is you stretch clear plastic, not black, but clear plastic over the area, and you leave it in place for 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime. You can also try sheet mulching, which is where you apply at least a foot or 18 inches worth of material to the surface of the ground. In this illustration, they've got a 1/2 to 1 inch of manure, 1 inch of newspaper, 1/2 to 1 inch of manure, 1/2 to 12 inches of mulch, another 1 to 2 inches of compost or manure, and then another couple inches of mulch. And you're starving the Bermuda, and hopefully that it won't grow through all these layers. And it does take some time, but it will work. The best way to get rid of Bermuda is by using some type of systemic herbicide. Systemic means that it moves to all areas of the plant. So you spray it on the leaves and it's absorbed and translocated down into every piece of the roots. Or in the case of Bermuda, all those underground parts, which are rhizomes and stolons. The more leaf area you have, the more product is absorbed and the more effective it's going to be. Sometimes it acts a little slowly, so it might take a week or so for you to notice any results. And these are some products that you can try. Now, the labels are kind of immaterial because there's lots of different labels. But the ingredient, the active ingredient that you're looking for is glyphosate. And you, of course, want to follow the instructions, all the safety instructions when you apply it. But this is the best way to get rid of Bermuda. There are both the local home improvement stores, the big box home improvement stores, have their own labeled product. And the one in this illustration on the right that says HDX, that came from the home improvement store with the big orange sign. And it's a lot less expensive than some of the other brand name products. You want to apply it when the grass is green and healthy. And so right now, and probably for the next, maybe the next month, depending on the weather, Bermuda is still going to be growing pretty well. The best time is when it's really, really hot, but it's, you know, it's still pretty warm out. So it's going to be in the 90s for the next, couple of weeks at least. The best time is to apply it in the morning so that it has all day to be effective and be absorbed by the grass. Of course, you want to apply it on a calm day and not during the wind. There's another, I guess you could call it a weed that grows sometimes in our Bermuda lawns, and it's called Nutsedge. It has a much stiffer leaf than Bermuda and grows much taller and faster than Bermuda. Here's kind of what it looks like. And it also grows from these little underground tubers, kind of like little potatoes, if you will. And that's why it's so hard to get rid of. You can pull the plant itself, but it leaves these tubers underground, and then they just sprout and produce more plants. So if you're going to apply any of the glyphosate products, and if you have nutsedge, or sometimes they call it nutgrass, you can add manage or sedge hammer to your glyphosate mixture and then spray the lawn at the same time. To help the product, the glyphosate product be more effective, you have to trick Bermuda. You want to water it, you want to baby it, you want to fertilize it, and don't mow it before you apply the product. Let it grow so it has more leaf area. Spray in the morning, we mentioned that. You can add fertilizer to the spray mixture, although it's not necessary, but always follow label instructions. Now I want to spend just a minute on the hazard and toxicity exposure, because there are some concerns when you use any chemical. Toxicity, they're signal words. Caution means that it's slightly dangerous, I guess. Warning is that it's moderately dangerous. Danger is severe. So these caution words, and they'll be on the label. And it's always better to choose the least toxic option. This little image shows you that caution means slightly toxic, warning means moderately toxic, danger severe, and the top one, danger poison, means highly. So that's why you want to be careful with washing your hands before and after mixing. wear eyeglasses or goggles. If you need to, wear a respirator. We're all wearing masks right now, so we can wear one while we're spraying or applying the glyphosate. And for dermal or skin exposure, you want to change your clothes and wash those clothes separately. Now, just because a product has these words on the label doesn't, how am I trying to say this? There are other products that also have danger words. I think that's a better introduction for the next slide. So, because I know a lot of people want to be organic, and that's fine. But organic herbicides can also have those danger words, those caution words. So, and here's just a few examples. So there's a product called Weed Farm that does have danger. Weed Zap is an Avenger or caution. AXXE is warning. So just don't think that organic products are safe because they obviously have some caution here. And so I want you to be sure and read the label on those products as well. Okay, now what? You've killed your grass. You have a plan. Now what do? You want to call Blue Stake, because before you do any kind of digging, it's important to know where your utility lines run. Now, they won't mark them across your whole property, but they will mark them at your property boundary. And then usually you can draw a straight line to your meter box or your electrical box or whatever on the side of your home. That's the path that the contractor took when he installed them, because that's the least expensive, right? Straight line. So in this case, the red dots are where Blue Stake marks the utility lines coming into a property. And after your grass has died, now you may get some residual pop-up. Most of the grass died. Maybe you've got a couple areas where there's still a few little green leaves. You can spot spray those. But after your grass has died, you can scalp it close to the ground. They're doing that now for winter ryegrass, and you can do that to your dead Bermuda grass as well. You can rototill the area and then rake out the dead grass, or you can remove the top few inches of the dead grass with a little bit of sod with a sod cutter or a bobcat. And I'll show you what I mean. So this is scalping. You might have seen this around town if they're out there, trying to get ready for winter overseeding. It's pretty messy, and it might not be something you want to do yourself. You might want to hire someone to do it for you. Rototilling, that's going to take a little muscle to do, to rototill the property and then rake out the remaining Bermuda. Or you can use a bobcat and just scrape off the top few inches, the dead grass, along with the top few inches of soil. You get as close as you can. And in this particular illustration, this homeowner chose the bobcat, and they also brought in some new soil, and they removed all the dead grass, and now they're ready to start grading their yard. And that's the next step. So here they're creating some mounds, some contouring mounds. And then, of course, raking them smooth. You have to be careful though with mounds, because you don't want it to look like you're creating a cemetery. So create gentle mounds and not too large. You can create swales, and I'll show you an illustration of that in a moment. Think about water harvesting, because if you can capture the rain that runs off your roof or runs through your property and slow it down, then you've got free water, and generally rainwater is much more beneficial for plants. Think about adding some boulders or rocks for a little more variety or texture. So here are the mounds that this homeowner created. The grass is very light and fluffy. The dirt is very light and fluffy at this point. So you can see the footprints that they've made going through. And you can see the beginnings of the water harvesting areas. They have these little channels. If you have black plastic under your granite mulch, you might want to think about removing it. It really doesn't, it's not beneficial to a landscape. It doesn't stop the weeds from growing because they grow right on top of it. It actually prevents rainwater from soaking into the soil. And because water condenses right under the bottom surface of the plastic, a lot of time that's where roots will migrate. And we want roots to be deep in the soil, not right up on top of the soil next to plastic. And we've had some good rains this summer, and so we had some great water harvesting challenges or perhaps opportunities. Unfortunately, a lot of times people just try and get rid of the water that lands on their land. And in this case, they've got a little, rock river going here. So if we can slow it down and perhaps collect it for a little while before it makes its journey onto, down to the street, then that helps with our landscapes. And here's some examples of some water harvesting. This homeowner's yard was contoured so that it collects rainwater from the home. And I don't think it collects any from the road, but definitely from the home. And you can see these slightly depressed areas where the water will collect and then soak into the soil. Now the water soaks in really fast, and I don't want you to think these are ponds. These are called swales, S-W-A-L-E, and within a few hours the water soaks into the soil, which is where we want it, because that's where the plant roots can take advantage of it. Now this is a commercial area, but again, they're collecting rainwater for their trees. And here's another one. This happens to be in a commercial area and next to a parking lot. And this granite covered area is pretty unattractive at this point. So they did a remodel on it and created curb cuts in the parking lot so the water could flow into this channel. And then they have some plants next to the channel that will get water during a rain event. And here it is with water in it. And also, I think a few years later. And in Tucson, they do a lot of curb cutting so that the landscaped areas along the roads can take advantage of the water. Okay, reworking your irrigation. Now, if you've had grass, you probably have PVC because that's how the water was delivered to your sprinklers. And if there are no breaks in the PVC lines, you can leave them where they are because you can actually attach the black poly, the flexible poly, to the PVC if you're going to put in a drip system. So here's some options. Of course, you can abandon the old PVCs. You can add new lines, or you can do retrofit. And as I mentioned, they have products, fittings, that will convert your PVC pipe to a drip line. And one of the pieces looks like this. The left side of this little fitting glues onto the PVC, while the right side with that little black rim, that's the pressure fitting where the black poly, flexible black poly fits in. And these are available, at your local home improvement store. And if you're going to be working on your irrigation system, what you might want to consider is installing valves for different groups of plants. Now, if you've had a lawn area that you're converting, if you're converting it to drip, you will need to put a pressure regulator on the system usually next to the valve, because sprinklers operate at full pressure, while drip irrigation operates at about half or a little less than half pressure. So if you group your plants and water them in groups, here's an illustration. So if you follow the golden line from in front of the house, there, it is actually going to the trees. And if you follow the red line, it is going to the shrubs. The blue line looks like it goes over in front of the house, maybe under the driveway, and maybe it's watering a vegetable area. Of course, it's unclear, but it's a separate line. And adding a new valve is not very expensive. The whole valve assembly runs about $30. Probably the most expensive part is going to be the labor if you have someone do it for you. Okay, the next part is planting and mulching. But think about your plant selection. The landscape plants for the Arizona desert has over 200 low water use plants that like growing here. And it has pictures of each one. It's online, or you can use the hard copy booklet for sure. But think about you know, how you're going to use the plants, their colors. You can do plant combinations, and that Xeriscape Landscape with Style has some great plant combination photos. Keep in mind, you know, where we live, our regionalism, and maybe even think about wildlife habitat if that's something that you're interested in. Usually when we say native plants, we use the term loosely. It may not be totally Sonoran desert native. They could be native to other areas as well, or native to other deserts, but most of them do really well here in our desert. This is one of our natives, though, that is, I think it's underused in landscape. This is creosote, and it has pretty yellow flowers, and the little fruits are this little kind of puffy, little fuzzy seed. And the leaves are very aromatic. Once you get them established, you can turn the water off. So water them for 6 months and then wean them off the drip system, and they'll survive just on rainfall alone. This is kind of what they look like growing out native on the desert. What about artificial turf? Some people like it. There's a lot of people might have thought about using it in the right area. I think it's you know, could be a great substitution. It's a little bit expensive, and it does get hot in the daytime. So it's a surface that children and pets might not want to play on during the day, especially in summertime. It does cool off at night, but just keep in mind it gets pretty warm in the daytime. Once you've removed your grass, you might want to call your city conservation office, because there are rebates available. In Chandler, it's $200 per 1,000 square feet, up to a maximum of $3,000. And that's mostly for commercial properties. But there have been some homeowner lawns that were removed that got, you know, an $800 rebate. But most of them are in the $200 to $400 range. Now it's time to enjoy your landscape. If you use native or desert adapted plants, you will attract our native wildlife, not pigeons, and hopefully not grackles. Here's a few natives: the woodpeckers, Gila woodpecker, the mourning dove, and cactus wren, and lots of butterflies. Arizona has a healthy population of butterflies. They're great pollinators. And you can do this. Now I have some before and after landscape conversion pictures for you. My clock says it's 10 after 7. Is that right? Yeah, pretty close. And this will just take a few minutes. So here we have a before picture of a little house with kind of like a sad front porch, but a grass in the area. And here's what it looked like after the conversion. They gave it a new front door, and it looks like they replaced some of the windows in the front, but a lot more interesting Just, you know, prettier landscape, a lot less maintenance for sure. And another one, this is a home in Chandler, and they enclosed the carport, made that a garage, and also changed the front yard. It looks like that. This home is in Tempe, and I want you to keep your eye on the vigas near the roof of the home, because this transformation was pretty dramatic. Another grass conversion where they kept their queen palms, I believe. Let's see. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. And regardless, they have a lot less maintenance here, which gives them more free time. Small grass areas are hard to water because the overspray is just constant. So this homeowner took out their grass areas, kept the big trees. This is another home in Chandler. It had some xeriscape, but they decided to take out the grass, what was grass that was there. And here's how that turned out. And they have since taken out that big ficus tree too. It was just too big for the space. Another home in Chandler. This was located at the end of a cul-de-sac. And so the little wall on the far lower right-hand corner, that was their property line. And beyond that was common area. So they took out their grass and put in xeriscape. And now it almost looks like their whole front yard also includes the common area. That little wall is right below that big green bush, kind of in the bottom right here. This is kind of a formal landscape with the very neatly trimmed shrubs. They took those out. And they don't have to worry about them anymore. They kept some grass. And this is the home where I showed you all those conversion pictures where they had the bobcat. This is the before picture. So they had a pretty expansive grass lawn in the front, which they removed. They kept the olive tree there. And here's what it looked like when they got done. Now, xeriscape is not just a term that we use here in the desert. It just means using plants that don't use a lot of water. And here is actually a photo from a home in Texas, and they did a conversion using plants that work in their area. And it, of course, now there's a lot less water, but it's also a lot more interesting to look at. So there are more resources for you. This is the Xeriscape book I was talking about, Xeriscape Landscaping with Style, that has lots of pictures of plant combinations and just landscape ideas. It's online as well. The Landscape Plants booklet is also online. This one has, like I mentioned, over 200 plants. And then, of course, with any landscape, you're going to need a good irrigation guide. And this is perfect. So landscape watering by the numbers. And I found this booklet. It's online and it's on your resource list. It came from the city of Scottsdale, and the cities share resources. This is a booklet that they put out in their, it was for their, they call it their revitalization for an older portion of the city that they wanted to try and encourage people to improve. So this booklet gives you, I think there's seven actual landscape architectural designs with a legend that gives the plants that they use in the design. And there's lots of different ideas. Some include lawns, some don't. One is for attracting birds, and I think one's for attracting butterflies. So you can take a look at this online and see if it gives you any ideas. Oh, this is just a close-up. And the Cesar Chandler has an online resource. This is Waterwise Landscaping at the address at the bottom of the screen. It's also on your resource list. This has over 600 plants. And many of the images that I used in the presentation today came from this resource because it has, I can't remember, do I have this on here? No, I don't. Let me go back a page. Back page up. There we go. So it has different design landscapes. It also has different elements within those landscapes, as well as the 600 plants. So I think this would be a great one if you have time to take a look at and get some ideas from it as well. There are also references online with each of the sponsoring cities tonight, with the city of Chandler and the town of Queen Creek. So these are on their websites. And then if you have questions, there are additional resources available. And now I'm going to turn it back to Daniela, and she's going to go through any of the questions that you may have listed and see if we can help you with those. But thank you so much for the class tonight. I can't wait till we go to face-to-face classes again.
Yes, we all can't wait to get back in person. But thank you, Kathy. That was a great presentation. And thank you for everyone who joined us this evening. Like Kathy mentioned, I am going to go through and we have a few questions for you. Does collection, and this is referring back to the slide when you were talking about rainwater harvesting and things like that. Does collection of water attract mosquitoes?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's why I was trying to emphasize that the water should soak in very, very rapidly and within a matter of hours. So no, there should not be any problem with standing water and mosquitoes. However, if you do have places in your yard or maybe your neighbor's yard where there is standing water, you can buy or you can maybe refer them to a little product called a Mosquito Dunk. And they look like little donuts, and you can get them at Walmart, you can get them at the home improvement stores, and they even make it in a granular form now where it contains a bacteria. It's called Bacillus thuringiensis. It's the same bacteria that's used for caterpillar control, just a different, a little different variant on it that it kills mosquitoes. So you put it in the water, it's safe for fish, it's safe for warm-blooded animals, it's safe for other insects, but it will keep the mosquitoes from completing their life cycle in the water. So I know we had a neighbor that had a green pool, and we went over there. The house was empty at the time, so it's not like we trespassed. Well, I guess we did, but we went over and threw a few of those mosquito dunks over the fence into the pool because the county hadn't done anything as far as the green pool deal. So, but yeah. But no, you shouldn't have to worry about soils with standing water.
Okay, great. The next question is, are there resources for designing xeriscape yards for neighborhoods with flood irrigation?
Oh, well, okay. Flood irrigation is different because the trees, like the desert adapted trees, like you would think of palo verdes and mesquites, they don't usually do well in flood irrigation. So I'm wondering about that. And maybe that could be a separate email, Daniela. Maybe she can email, or she can email you. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit more in depth, because maybe I'm not following exactly what their question is. But if it's a flood irrigated area, then yeah, then the desert adapted plants might not tolerate that much water.
Gotcha. Yes. What I'll do is I'll save the comment, and it looks like it was from Terry. So I'll save the comment, and then we will discuss on our end and follow up in an email.
Oh, great. Yeah.
If that works. Yeah. Okay. And then somebody wants to know, what do you think about using wood chip mulch instead of rock?
I think it's a fabulous idea. In fact, many of the parks in Chandler use wood mulch in place of granite in their landscaped areas. And I wish more people would do that. It does have to be replenished periodically, but also so does granite. You're kind of refreshed periodically. But it's just so much more beneficial to the soil, because as it decomposes, it releases nutrients back into the soil, and that's beneficial for plants. So yeah, it's a great idea.
Okay, great. And oh, there's a question about finding the recording. So yes, today's session and presentation is recorded. Bear with us. It does take us, we're a two-person team, and it takes us quite a bit of time to edit and post these. So it will be posted on the same page where you went to register. However, the date is still to be determined. I am trying to set reminders about emailing people when those are available, but you'll still be, if you get impatient, you can email me and just check on the status. But again, it will be on the same page where you went to find the irrigation workshops and landscaping workshops through the city's webpage. I think that's everything. Again, someone was having issues finding that plant list that Kathy was referring to. I did put the link in the chat box, but just in case anybody needs it and they're just listening, it's chandler.watersavingplants.com. And that's going to give you all sorts of ideas and pictures, pretty similar to what Kathy has referenced in her presentation today. All right, so I don't see any other questions. So we'll go ahead and end today's session. Thank you again, everyone who attended this class. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you have other questions or just need more details about certain things, our contact information is on the screen right now. And then just a quick note, we do have a survey when you exit this WebEx. And if you could just take a minute to let us know how we did, provide us some feedback, that would be very much appreciated. But we thank you all again for joining us, and we hope you have a great night. Thank you.